Hi everybody, this is lecture for Module 3, What is Sociology? And this will cover Introduction to Sociology, Chapter 1, pages 17 to 27. Okay, let's start. So today we're going to talk about these basic concepts. We'll talk about what sociology encompasses and how everyday topics are shaped by social and historical forces. Some of it we already talked about. And we'll also talk about the fact that sociology involves not only acquiring knowledge, but also developing a sociological imagination. Other things we'll cover are these modern theoretical approaches. So I want you to be able to identify some of the leading theorists and distinguish between their theoretical approaches to social life. Okay, let's move on. So one of the first concepts I want to cover is sociological imagination. And this concept was thought of by C. Wright Mills. And in 1959, he coins the term sociological imagination. He defines this as an awareness of the relationship between an individual and a wider society, because he argues that we live in this very small bubble where we only see people that we're close to, or we're related to, or we work with, and we don't really understand our issues in the scope of the entirety of the world. So, in other words, it is the ability to view our own society as an outsider might, rather than from the perspective of our limited experiences and cultural biases. So, as an example, think about this issue. Is unemployment a personal or is it a social issue? To those of us who had to deal with unemployment, it definitely is a private trouble, right? It's something that we have to deal with. I am unemployed. It means that I am not working right now. However, that usually, we tend to think of the world in our own terms, but we can think of unemployment as a public issue, because when 3 million people are unemployed, their experiences are in some way or shape or way could be similar to one another. So we can look at ourselves through the perspective of a larger issue. Another thing I wanted you guys to read for this week is the short article about the body ritual among the Nasarema. And in it, I'm sure you've read it, it's very interesting. And there's one part that I copied here. It talks about this female daily body ritual. Special women's rites are performed only 4 times during each lunar month, but what they lack in frequency is made up in barbarity. Women bake their heads in small ovens for about an hour. Does that remind you of anything? Think about this article as an example of the sociological imagination. So my question to you is, are the Nasiremas so much different than you and I? Because when you spell Nasirema backwards, what do you get? American, right? So I want you guys to think about this article as an example of sociological imagination, and think about when you were reading it. When I first read it for the first time, I never thought that it was describing myself, but it was, right? And my question to you is, why do you think he wrote it that way? Why do you think Horace Minor wrote it in this particular way? And why is it so hard for us to identify ourselves in this article? So think about this. Think about this article as an example of sociological imagination, because it introduces us to ourselves as if somebody else was watching us. If somebody very unfamiliar with American society, let's say, I don't know, somebody who lives in a tribal society somewhere in the Amazon, if they looked at us, they would look at us a little differently. And this is what sociological imagination is about. It's about stepping yourself out of your comfort zone and looking at things from a completely different perspective. But now let's move on to modern theoretical approaches. So there's several ones I want to talk to you guys about. And by the way, you won't have to know rational choice theory. But let's start with symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interactionism is this idea that we exchange symbols through social interaction. And symbol is something that stands for or represents something else. The father of this field is George Herbert Mead, and he argues that one sense of self develops through interactions with others because others teach individuals how to act, what to say, and what to think. So in other words, when we talk, laugh, spend time with each other, we are engaged in exchanging symbols. So that's symbolic interactionism. That's how sociologists who are symbolic interactionists look at society. By the way, modern theoretical approaches, all this means these are different subfields within the field of sociology. So some of us are symbolic interactionists, some of us might be functionalists. Functionalism argues that society is made up of parts that carry out functions that contribute to the whole, right? So different institutions serve different functions in society and work together, ensuring survival of society. So for example, education, politics, religion, and economy, those are all institutions that are present in our society, and all of them are in some way involved in the workings of society. In other words, things exist because they serve a function. So for example, crime. You might think that crime doesn't have a function, but yet it does, at least to functionalists. They argue that for every criminal out there, we need police officers, judges, courts, and so on. So crime, in one way, is able to create jobs. This perspective stresses cohesiveness, working together of different parts, because if parts are interrelated and one breaks down, it may lead to the break of other institutions as well. Think about kind of like a domino effect, right? When you push one, all the other ones start to follow. So here's a little picture of how interrelated these institutions can be in this functionalist viewpoint, right? You see like this little puzzle. If one starts to break apart, it starts to affect the functioning of others. And in the worst case scenario, what might happen is a total collapse of society. So that's functionalism. Another one is Marxism and class conflict. And remember, I told you with Marx, two things are always going to be true. He's always about economy and he's always about conflict. So he argues that conflict is a normal feature of society because groups in society are engaged in continuous power struggle for control of scarce resources. So, for example, money, right? We all fight. We all want a little bit more. Individuals and groups use power to promote their interests. Now, power is defined as ability of individuals or groups to make their interests count even if resistance occurs. Meaning that if somebody doesn't agree with us and we have power, we can force them to agree with us or go along with us to some extent. How is power exerted? Through force, through rules, laws, and even ideologies. Ideology is basically ideas that are used to justify the actions. And from Marxism, I want to give you these two quotes. History of all existing society is a history of class struggles, right? So as long as we have been a society, there were always those who had more than others, and that created conflict. And this quote, ruling ideas are the ideas of the ruling class. Think about it. Do you agree with this? Think about what this quote might mean. Those who have power make rules for us to follow, but those rules really are there to help those in power. Now, let's continue. And now I'm going to come clean and say this is my favorite theory, feminism and feminist theory. Feminists argue that gender relations and gender inequality are central to the study of society. So where can we see inequality in our society? For example, sociologists point out to employment and pay gap, right? So women earn about 12 cents less than men. In education, at home, in politics, those are all some ways in which women might be unequal. Today, feminists also point to the intersection of gender, race, and social class, and social stratification and inequality. So, for example, they argue that women are not only discriminated on the basis of their gender, but often on the basis of their race, ethnicity, sexuality, or religion. So women, all women don't experience the world the same way. Excuse me. Okay. The next theory, this one is a little complicated. Postmodern theory. Postmodern theory argues that social life has no grand narrative, and what that means is that it's not going somewhere. So Marx used to say that, you know, we're moving from feudal societies to capitalist societies, and then to socialist, and then we're gonna have communism, and everything's gonna be great. That we're moving forward in some way. We're moving towards something better. Postmodern theory does not really look at the world that way. They argue that existing theories have not successfully explained social life in contemporary society. Society has focused on a shift from production to consumption. They argue, so for example, we no longer produce things, but we actually offer services, and not only that, we are more engaged in consumption rather than production, right? Social life is in constant flux. So everything is changing. One day they tell you that bacon is good, the next they tell you it's terrible for you. You never really know what's going on because every day information is changing. They also have problems with this notion of history and progress. History, they argue, history is one-sided. It is always written by the winners, and therefore it's subjective, and therefore it never tells the full story. Because if we are to study the society as a whole, shouldn't we hear what the loser side, so to say, has to go through? Progress is also a problematic notion for theorists, postmodern theorists, because they argue that for every step forward, we are taking 2 steps back. So we might have put men on the moon, but we also created a bomb that can kill us all in seconds. But what is running the world, they argue, is media and communication technologies. Think about how omnipresent media is. It's everywhere. It's on the subways, it's in our TVs, it's probably in our phones, right? So that's postmodern theory. Furthermore, whether you're a symbolic interactionist, functionalist, postmodernist, or so on, we can divide these subfields into microsociology and macrosociology. So study microsociology, micro means something small, so study of individual and small group interactions. Symbolic interactionism is microsociology because of its study of face-to-face interaction. Macrosociology is a study of large social processes and institutions. So functionalism and Marxism are macrosociology because of their study of institutions, political and economic systems, industrialization, and globalization. And finally, how can sociology help us? It can make us aware of cultural differences, that not all of us look at the world the same way. It can help us in assessing the effects of policies. Was this a good policy? Did it really help the people that it was supposed to help? And then, of course, it leads to self-enlightenment. We might know more about ourselves, and for that reason, be better. All right, this is it for Chapter 1.